This video ranks every viable Town Hall 13 attack strategy. So if you want to win more 3 stars, you need to know the best armies for any base and the worst armies to avoid them. So let's rank this tier list based on strength, ease of use, and flexibility. Starting with the F tier, these are the worst of the worst strategies. Basically, being the Super Go Wipe, the Yeti Smash, and the P.E.K.K.A. Smash. They're not really that good. They either are just really weak or they get outclassed. Next up is D tier. These are strategies that are still fairly weak, though they can be used in very specific situations. Case in point, the Super Archer Blimp Hydra. Now, on paper, this strategy looks really strong. Pretty much its ease of use and technically, on paper, it should be very strong. Well, it really isn't, because without the Grand Warden, Dragon and Dragon Riders tend to struggle, especially if there's a back-end air defense. So otherwise, it's just a relatively weak army. Also, within the D tier is, of course, the Drag Bat. This army used to be really dang good, but nowadays it's inconsistent. Hitting this with multiple multi-target infernos can be a pain, especially for bat spells, and dragons can die fairly easily at Town Hall 13. Of course though, for casual players, dragons and the bats can really swiftly move through bases, which does have that ease of use, which of course does give you time to subscribe and ring the bell. Next we move into our C tier armies. These are fairly okay armies to use, but they're going to be very base specific. Starting off with the Skelly Donut Lalo. Now the Skelly Donut Lalo is a very specific strategy. However, it's a really strong army. It's just held back by the fact that it's not great for a normal casual player like me or you, and it's just way too base specific, which is why it's down in C tier. Also within the C tier is the Super Dragons. Honestly, Super Dragons used to be incredibly strong, so here at Town Hall 13, they're kind of weak. They really are much more specific to the base, since you are bringing in the use of the Super Minion Blimp, but of course there is an ease of use making it somewhat okay for casual players like me and you. And lastly in the C tier is the Queen Charge Recall Dragons. Now if I had to be honest, I think this is the best C tier army. It is a little bit less base specific than Skelly Donut and Super Dragons, but it is still an incredibly base specific army because you need very specific things. But with the dragons, this actually pairs up really well with them. Of course, has that ease of use and can be quite strong. Otherwise, this is actually a very good army that I would probably try out, even though it's only in the C tier. Now we move into the B tier. These are armies that are fairly good. You can definitely use these in some situations, but they're not as base specific as lower tiers. Starting off with the Zap Lalo. Now, the Zap Lalo has often been a fairly consistent army. This is a strategy that, while is not the easiest thing in the world for casual players, it is not as difficult as some other armies. So it is fairly strong. It does have a bit more bases it works against, and of course, it is still somewhat strong. Next up, we have 2 armies that are fairly similar to each other. The Super Minion Blimp E-Drags and the Super Minion Blimp Dragons. Now, these 2 armies are fairly similar because for the most part, you're not having a ton of spells to support them. While this does seem really bad on paper, like the Electro Dragons, they actually do get a lot of really nice value. They are a little bit more base specific, such as box style designs that you would see typically at Town Hall 15 that you're seeing at Town Hall 13. It's the same thing for the dragons. However, this will allow you to have your king, queen, and royal champion for the back end part of the base, which makes it fairly good. There is an ease of use for more casual players, and of course, it can be fairly strong, and they're both fairly good, and I definitely recommend trying them out. And lastly in the B tier is the Blizzard Hydra. The Blizzard Hydra, a very good army, and in my opinion, better than the Super Archer Blimp. Unlike Super Archer Blimp, in Blizzard, you can keep your Grand Warden. And that Grand Warden is such an important thing to a Hydra army, which is why the Blizzard is still very alive and well, and can still work. Has an ease of use thanks to the Blizzard. It's strong somewhat, which is why it's down here in B tier, and it is going to be a little bit more base dependent, but still incredibly good for a B tier army. Moving into A tier, these are considered great armies that you can use on a wider variety of bases. Starting with the Queen Charge Lalo. The Queen Charge Lalo has always been a fairly consistent army to use. It is really, really strong. It doesn't have a limit to the bases it can hit. It can be used with different siege machines, which makes it incredibly good. So there's a lot of different situations that I would definitely recommend this army. The only downside is just it's not as consistent for regular casual players, but it is still a very good army. And of course, if you made it this far in the video, consider using my creator code to support me and anything I do here on the channel using my creator code, CorruptYT. Next in the A tier is the Queen Charge Dragon Riders. Now, the Queen Charge Dragon Riders is very similar to the Queen Charge Lalo. However, with the only difference being that it is fairly easy, or at least easier to use. So it has the same strength, it has the same base flexibility, it just doesn't have the same siege alternatives, but that doesn't really mean it's even worse than it. Otherwise, this is a better version if you don't want a Lalo or you do not trust your Lalo skills. Next up in the A tier is the Queen Charge Super Hogs. The Super Hogs are pretty good. They are definitely somewhat strong, and what's really nice about them is that they do have a little bit of ease of use. So there are a couple things that are holding it back from S tier, but the main thing is that it's slightly better for a more casual player. It's still slightly stronger than other strategies in lower tiers, and it is a bit less base dependent than those lower tiers, but it does deserve a spot in the A tier as it is still a very good army. Following them, also in the A tier, is the Super Barch Attack. Super Barch is honestly a surprise, because Super Barch I didn't think actually would work at 13, but since it works at Town Hall 14, it works at Town Hall 15, this strategy does work at Town Hall 13. It is a really good army. Since a bulk of it is just your heroes and you have access to the Apprentice Warden, it's easy to use, it's pretty dang strong, and it is a little bit more base dependent here at Town Hall 13 than other ones, but it's still incredibly good. And the last one, it might be a shocker to you, but it's the Super Bowler Smash. So the Super Bowlers did fall from S tier down into the A tier, mostly because they are a little bit inconsistent. They can still work pretty well on a good chunk of bases. They're still very strong, and the ease of use is quite good. It's just the inconsistencies can sometimes really ruin stuff. So it's why Super Bowlers did fall off a little bit. They're still very good, especially if you want to use a smash attack like Super Bowlers. Now we get to the S tier strategies. These are the best of the best, starting with the Super Witch Smash. Super Witch Smash is just insanely strong. They can work really well on a wide variety of bases. They have some really good ease of use, and all in all, it's a strategy that I heavily recommend that you use. I even made a guide on it recently, which you can check the little annotation up at the top corner, which is just, it's an incredibly strong strategy that I'd recommend that you learn. Next up in the S tier is the Queen Charge Hybrid. The Queen Charge Hybrid is just always a very consistent army. They're incredibly strong, and realistically, there is nothing that could really go wrong with you using Hybrid. It's an incredibly strong army. I recommend that you use and practice the Queen Charge Hybrid, so that way you can get more 3-stars with it. And of course, the two best strategies in the S tier is both the Super Archer Blimp Lalo and the Blizzard Lalo. Now, these two armies are really considered the best, mostly because they are very strong. They're pretty much follow-up Lavoons because you're using the Blizzard or Super Archer Blimp, followed up by a Hero Dive to clear a majority of the base, and then basically finishing up and cleaning up the rest of the base with the Lavoon. Both of these armies do that insanely well, since you can get a large amount of value from either the Blizzard or the Super Archer blimp on practically any base, and it's fairly easy for newcomers to the Lava Loon to get more comfortable with a strategy like this. So that right there is every single strategy that is viable at Town Hall 13 ranked. I hope that this tier list helps you find the best strategy for you for 3 stars. If you've got a Town Hall 15 or Town Hall 14, I recommend checking out one of these videos where I rank every strategy, and I will see you there.